because it just made. There we go. Okay, right. Okay, cool. So I will. I guess we can kick this off then, since most people are everyone is here in spirit or otherwise. So we'll get, obviously the Cohesity lot will jump on more towards the end, but I'm going to basically go over the vRetreat here. So thank you all for coming. We're going to start off with Mark Hoffman here from Progress. He's going to talk. Is it going to be a bit on Flowmon, Mark? Is that what we're talking about today?
Well, we're going to talk about an integration between LoadMaster and Flowmon. I'm not going to talk too much about LoadMaster. I'm going to talk more about Flowmon because really the value of the proposition is in the Flowmon piece.
Okay, so that's what we're going to go through, and then we're going to do a bit of a Q&A afterwards. So you can either keep your questions to yourself, or you can feel free to just unmute yourself and go to town on Mark. No worries on that one. And then afterwards, like, we can do a bit of a Q&A and a bit of a discussion about what's just happened, and then we'll have a break. And then after that, Cohesity's presentation, and then after that, we will jump onto the VR segment of it, which will be more of a kind of more networking, but a bit more kind of interactive, a bit more fun, and that should be good. I've noticed several of you getting your eye in on the golf, on the VR golf this week beforehand. So I guess some of you will be better than others. We'll see who'll come out the vRetreat golfing victor for this particular event. And yeah, we're looking to do some more VR ones as well, because as more people acquire headsets, we can obviously get more people in to do bigger events and stuff like that. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I will hand over to Mark to do his presentation. So there we go, Mark. If you want, I don't know if we want to stick everyone on mute, or no, everyone's on mute pretty much. I will just
well,
hand over to you.
I don't mind if people interrupt me, Patrick, as I go along. I mean, I'd prefer if you just spoke up rather than stick things in chat, because I get sort of focused on what I'm doing and I'll just ignore all that. But if you speak up, I'll definitely stop. I'm going to keep the slides to a minimum and give you some introductory material on what I'll be talking about first. And then pretty much it's just going to be an open demo. I have some things that certainly I want to run through, but if anybody, as I said before, has any questions on whatever I show on the screen or anything that occurs to you, just politely stop me. Hey, you, shut up a second and let me ask you a question. And no troubles there. So let me share my screen. So as I say, I'm going to go through some material about Flowmon and LoadMaster integration, and how you can combine the two of these together to present diagnostic information with context. I think this is particularly apropos for LoadMaster customers, who are basically my bread and butter in my job, in getting them to try Flowmon and to see the benefit of Flowmon. And you'll understand why in a few minutes. So just a little bit about me in a way of a short bio. I've been a product manager with Kemp now for over 7 years. And previous to this, I worked at another ADC manufacturer for 8 years. They are now a thing of the past. They were absorbed by the Fortinet behemoth. So I do know my way around a load balancer. So as I say, don't be shy if you have questions about anything about ADC functionality. I've also been working with the Flowmon product now for about a year. And quite frankly, I'm really impressed with it. And in particular, its ability to deliver, as I say here, actionable insights using configuration information from the LoadMaster. And that's pretty much the focus here. And I hope you agree that this is a very valuable combination. So a little bit about what happened at the end of last year. As some of you probably know, Kemp and its LoadMaster and Flowmon products were acquired by Progress Software. who have been around for 40 years. I've been involved in a number of acquisitions like this in my career, and quite frankly, this is the best one I've ever been involved in. They're quite committed to the people of the company as well as the products that they've acquired. And so far at least, the blush is not off the rose yet. I think the companies are actually a great fit, and we have some great opportunities ahead of us. Basically, in 2022, we're going to be extending capabilities of Progress products to absorb information and provide information to the collector, and also extending templated deployments available for LoadMaster currently to include other Progress products. So we've got a lot of good work ahead of us. But the existing integration that I'll be showing you today focuses on what we've been calling network telemetry on LoadMaster and how to provide context when building dashboards on the Flowmon collector. And I'll get into that in a minute. The idea here is, I think that this is, for me, it's an ideal way to introduce the concept of network telemetry to small to medium business customers and help them start realizing the benefits that network telemetry can provide. And and by the way, at no actual cost to them, which I'll get to in a minute. So a little bit about LoadMaster. So LoadMaster's been in the ADC market for over 2 decades. The basic concept of a load balancer is dead simple. It's a reverse proxy that balances load across a pool of application servers. And while load balancing is definitely the core of LoadMaster's identity, it also provides many other features that are related and expected in an industry-leading ADC. Some of them are listed here. Things like secure multi-factor authentication and single sign-on to applications, SSL termination and multi-certificate SNI support, compression and caching, load balancing functionality, of course, with appropriate methods, high availability, scalability, and resiliency, client persistence methods, so specific clients can return to specific servers for whatever reason, advanced content matching and modification policies to route traffic appropriately, and of course, application-aware health checking and scheduling. Any questions on that so far? As I say, I'm being pretty summary here, and we'll get into more detail in a minute. Flowmon is one of the pluses now that actually comes with LoadMaster. When you get a LoadMaster, you also get a free version of the Flowmon probe technology, and that captures flow data and sends it to a collector. Typical deployment is shown in the diagram at right. The probe and collector are capable of a bunch of different formats in terms of collecting and forwarding flow data. And on the LoadMaster, we chose to support IPFix because it is the latest standardized version of the latest standardized format, rather. And it's also defined in an RFC, which is RFC 7011. This diagram shows the general concept of how a probe and collector might be deployed. The probe is many times deployed alongside a router or another network device, and that provides entry into the network to be monitored. In the diagram, the probe is shown next to the router, which is capable of exporting flow data in one of the formats supported by the probe. The probe then analyzes this and sends the data on to the collector. Data can also be sent directly from the router to the collector if it supports, one of these formats. So it's a natural question to ask, I think. So why have a probe on the LoadMaster? In this particular scenario, the return traffic from the servers basically has no visibility at the router. Since the LoadMaster is proxying the traffic back, from the servers to the client, it may make changes to the server responses as configured for the application. And so there's a level of data here that is somewhat out of the visibility of the router. If you have a probe on the load master, then you're able to analyze the traffic between the load master and the backend servers with the actual backend server responses in the flow data. So with both of these probes sending flow data to the same collector, you can then build a picture of the entire network. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it also makes sense for smaller businesses that might not have most or all of its servers behind, that might have most or all of its servers behind Loadmaster. And also as an introduction to IP-fix and flow technology. Network telemetry can be sent from the Loadmaster probe to literally any network collector besides the Flowmon collector that supports IP-fix. There are a number of free versions of these available. So as I say, I think this is a great way for a Loadmaster customer to start to benefit from Flowmon, as well as in general, the idea of collecting flow data rather than packet data. And the reason that's important is you see the item I have at the bullet I have at the bottom here with the highest performance. There are a lot of flow formats. There's a bunch of stuff on the Flowmon network, the Flowmon website about flow formats, as well as the compression differences between the storage differences rather between doing full packet captures and just analyzing flow data. And as you can see down here, the savings is on the order of 500 to 1 in terms of how much data storage you need, and also how much network bandwidth you need to pass this data around the network. So it's a much more economical way of doing first, I would say the first and second levels of network analysis, which really concentrate on all the data in the headers rather than the payload of the packets, which are essentially not part of the flow data. So that's just a quick little tutorial on what flow data is versus packet data. Flow data is basically a digest of the packet data. So any questions on that before I move on?
Just a quick one, just to clarify in my head. So when, say, for example, Flowmon probe goes on to Loadmaster, and I think I saw a figure of 0.2% or something, but I was just wondering, is the overall impact on, say, for example, Loadmaster, what is that? So when Flowmon goes on to it and starts, probing for that data, or even if it's like telemetry data, not necessarily a payload, what's the total impact of it?
Oh, well, it definitely does have a bit an impact. I did a bit of a study on that. It depends on the number of interfaces that you're actually monitoring, and the capacity of the Loadmaster box. It varies anywhere from a few percentages to up to 25%, as I recall, on most of our platforms. Excuse me. Of course, with a virtual machine, you can keep getting resources to overcome that, but it is definitely a consideration, particularly on hardware, when you have, you're pinned to a particular set of resource sizes. So yeah, there's definitely an impact. And like I said, it's somewhere between 0 and 25%, depending on the number of interfaces monitored. That was a study we did basically across our hardware models. So if you have, for example, 8 interfaces, you're going to pay a relatively high price for the first one. So you're going to increase maybe 5% to 10%, and then it will go up as you keep adding more interfaces. I think the interesting thing that I found was that once you get above, say, 4 interfaces, um, the penalty you pay tends to get smaller. I don't know why that is, but that's what we observed in the testing. So you're absolutely right. There is an effect, and it is not insignificant.
It's good to know, because I mean, as an architect, as you know, all these things have to be taken into account. You know, pros and cons conversation, that, you know, should we enable it and how much of it we actually need. So it's good to know.
Sure.
I mean, is that study available somewhere for people to consume?
Well, that was an internal study we did for internal sizing. I haven't actually made that publicly available yet, but it is available to our salespeople who consult with our customers directly. But at some point, I do need to do a blog about that.
Good. I look forward to it.
To be perfectly honest, yeah, you're absolutely right. The ideal place to put a probe is next to the router, or, below it, if you will. Locating on Loadmaster is really only an asset in a case where you don't have another probe, let's say, and you're just getting into network telemetry, or as I said before, that you have sort of a piece of the network that's kind of hidden behind the Loadmaster, and that interacting with those directly with those machines is impossible from the router.
Thank you. I won't hold up the presentation, I guess, because it's an interesting topic, but I'll look forward to your blog as well.
Do you mind if I ask a quick query?
Not at all.
Oh, actually, it might be on the next slide, believe it or not, and I'll hang fire.
Okay. Okay.
But again, actually, it's not there. Where the probes on the Loadmaster, do you really care what's behind what the Loadmaster is? Does it have to be x86, or as long as it's just a HTTP service or TCP service? Do you have any benefits from having probes?
If it's a layer 3, layer 7 service, that's all we
care.
care about.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is.
These guys know I have a bit of a passion for tinkering with ARM, so quite a lot of my web servers are now ARM-based servers. So as long as it doesn't care what it's talking to you after that, then that's pretty cool.
Oh, it could be anything. It could, and you'll see in my demo that the 2 virtual services that we'll be talking about, as you see over here on the lower green box on the right-hand side here, I have a virtual service that is essentially set up to load balance 3 rather, Dell ECS storage nodes.
Okay.
That's just storage load balancing, basically. You're not really presenting anything on websites or anything. That's a very specialized use where you need specific visibility into the traffic. The second bullet item then is a more, I would say, normally load balanced service, Microsoft Exchange. And each of the services there is represented by a single virtual service or a single IP, but multiple services underneath, such as MapB and AutoDiscover and all of those lovely Exchange services. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. So here on my slide, this is a logical diagram of the setup I have here in my home office, where I have a probe running on the Loadmaster, and it is capturing the traffic from the outside world, which I didn't represent here just for space, going to the backend servers for these 2 applications, the Dell ECS storage nodes and the MS Exchange virtual services. Virtual services are what we call a virtual IP on Loadmaster, and you'll hear me say things like VS and sub-VS throughout the rest of this conversation. Those are Loadmaster constructs. A VS, as I said, is a virtual IP, and a sub-VS are the services underneath to which can be routed from basically using the URL. So if you come in with an OAB URL, you're going to go to a particular set of services. If you come in with, say, a MAPI URL, you're going to go to a different set of services. And so the collector that I have running here, I just want to make the point, is not running on Loadmaster at all. It's on a completely different machine. and it's receiving the probes, the flow data that is sent to it from the probe, and storing it in its internal database, and then presenting it in the dashboards that we'll create. Any questions on that? Okie dokie. So this is the goal. I just wanted to show this is just a snapshot that I took yesterday as I was setting things up. So this is where I want to get. I want to be able, the whole concept of this integration is that I want to be able to look at my application traffic through the same lens, if you will, or using the same configuration information specifically, as I do when I'm looking at my LoadMaster. In my mind, the persona here is a current LoadMaster customer who wants better visualization of the data going through the LoadMaster. LoadMaster does provide some tools in its UI to do some analysis, but nothing near the level of what you're seeing here on this screen. And that's to me the beauty of Flowmon for the LoadMaster customers. It helps them visualize things that right now they have to buy some third-party tool to do. This probe being on the LoadMaster, if they have some free version of a collector, or they buy a Flowmon collector, they have the kind of visibility that I think probably they've always wanted. So just to get you familiar with the screen, because we'll be seeing it in a few minutes, what you'll be seeing later is a similar screen. There'll be some differences that you'll notice immediately, but I'll have one dashboard here just for the entire LoadMaster load balancer. So it's sort of a 50,000-foot view of all the traffic that's going through it. Then there will be a summary tab here, and then tabs for each virtual service and the sub virtual services underneath it. So there'll be this is the LoadMaster VS summary tab, the second one here from the left. The third one is the ECS VS, or the Dell ECS storage VS. And then you have the Microsoft Exchange VS, and then its sub VS is presented in separate dashboards. Now, don't worry, we're not going to go slog through the UI to create all of this. It's all going to be done. It's all going to be done for you if you use the scripts that I'll be introducing you to next.
Quick question on that, Mark.
Yes.
If you had several load balancers, would that all appear in the same dashboard? Do they all, you have multiple load masters feeding into the one flow
Yeah,
system?
Collectors are capable of taking input from multiple probes and then collating that data together. So yes.
So you'd be able to sort of get a view of, oh, all my load balancers are busy today, rather than having to flick down them all and.
Oh, well, yes. Now, okay, public service announcement. I've only been working on these scripts for about 6 months, so I haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay.
So joining multiple load masters together and their application services into a single set of dashboards is right now beyond the capabilities of these scripts, but certainly possible to set up that manually. The reason I did these scripts is because it is somewhat daunting to set up network telemetry on the dashboard end. Fairly simple just to enable it on the LoadMaster and start sending the probes out. But to go to a collector, any collector, I don't care which one you pick, and set up something that gives you valuable insight in a context that you already understand, that's an exercise for the reader in most products. So the intent of these scripts is to give the LoadMaster customer a leg up by presenting this information in a context they already understand.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly, selling Flowmon through Loadmaster is one of the ways that we wanted to improve the Loadmaster, the Flowmon market share when Kemp acquired Flowmon, which was just a little over a year now. Any other questions? Okie dokie. So I'm just going to show you a short little video of 2 scripts that I ran just yesterday to set all the stuff that I'm going to show you up. This won't take long, so don't worry. So I've got one script here that's called lmfmc make config. And all it does is it takes this text file that I'm showing you. These are the tuple that defines a VS on the Loadmaster. So there's 2 VSs, as I told you before, and I'm going to make a config file that will help me create dashboards. So this shell is dead simple to run. You just give it the IP basically of the Loadmaster that you want to represent dashboards for. And I'll be typing the IP here in a second, and hit return, and off it goes. I require a couple of tools here. I use XMLint and JQ to do stuff in the script, so they have to be around. Now I'm asking just for credentials for the Loadmaster, which I need to do what I need to do. So I'm going to enable the API, which is already enabled in this case, get a token, and start talking to the Loadmaster to grab all the information I need. Here it's asking me, well, it's telling me what the default client filter is. So that's any, and the client link speed at a gigabyte. Now I'm just letting the user change that if they need to. For my home network, that's all fine. So I'm just hitting return. And we're done. Now we've got an FMC data.json file, which is the input file for the other script that we will run that will actually create the dashboards. And just to show you that file, it's a fully conformant JSON file. JSON is just easier for the Flowmon API to consume and easier to manipulate in my eyes than XML is. So it goes into a JSON file. Any questions so far? Okay, so now we've got a configuration file, and I'm going to make some dashboards now. This takes a little bit longer to run, so I'm not going to let the whole thing run. I might just, oops, I didn't go forward. Here it is. All right, so picking up where we left off previously. I said picking up where we left off. Okay, so the FMC setup shell is a little bit more complex. I'm not going to explain everything with respect to the options. Basically, I'm creating one of everything here as I execute it. We're going to create a full set of dashboards for both of the virtual services that are on the Loadmaster. I'm going to get a new API key. So once that starts, you'll start seeing output similar to the other script. And again, it has to ask for credentials to log into the collector. So it does that. And as it starts to execute, you'll start seeing lots of stuff like this, where it's just returning the IDs. And as long as you see an ID being returned and there's nothing that says null, then the script is running just fine. It's creating, it's rather complicated, as I said, to set up all this network telemetry stuff. So as you can see, it can be a rather long and painful process. So this automation, I think, is really key to getting people to adopt these sorts of systems. When we look at the collector, there are a lot of conveniences that are built into the collector in terms of setting this up the first time. But if you really want to put specific context on that information, again, exercise for the reader in all of these similar products. So I'm just going to cut to the chase here. At the end here, it creates the VS summary dashboard, and we're done. So now I'm going to switch over to my live system and show you around a bit. Let's see, let me check my time. How am I doing on time? I got 18 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, you've got 18 minutes, but you can, if I said that people have been asking the questions, you can bleed into the Q&A, which is 15 minutes on top.
Okay, cool. So now I've, this is the set of dashboards that script created. I tweaked it a little since from the other screen before I ran the scripts again to create these dashboards. So it's slightly different in that you're seeing more information in this traffic structure. Basically the blue lines are the actual traffic running through the machine. So it's pushing somewhere around 20 megabits of traffic, and it's got and the black and green lines are showing you the server response times and the round trip times. You can also look at the retransmissions that are occurring on the network, but you can't look at both at the same time. For this chart, I chose the SRT and the RTT. We'll have RTT on in later chapters, later dashboards rather. At this level, I think it's the SRT and RTT that are most important. RTR becomes a little bit more important at lower levels. So as you can see, we can get a peek into the TLS versions that your clients are using. This is a great way to understand the security profile of your clients on your network. If you see a TLS 1.1 thing appear here, you're going to want to drill down on that and find out exactly which clients you have are using TLS 1.1 and tell them to stop it. And that's possible because each of these widgets, I'm not going to go into this right now, but each of these widgets has this more info, and this takes you into the analysis section where you can dig deeper into the flows to find, the specific flows where these where that TLS 1.1 version would be is being used by some client, and then go slap their hands. All of these widgets that you're looking at here are widgets that come with the box. I didn't create these. There are some widgets I have later that I did specifically created for the purpose, but these are all just common widgets that are delivered with the box. Top flows, top uploads, top downloads, service traffic structure. If I scroll down, specific email traffic structure, UDP services, TCP services, and there's a whole bunch of others. Just to slide out of this for a moment, if I go to this, sorry, it's the configuration tab. These are what are called presets. They're essentially templates for dashboards, and these are absolutely brilliant. I mean, they give you what you need to do specific dashboards for specific purposes. Office 365, Salesforce, social networks, something a little bit more detailed on TLS than just that single client widget that I showed you before, and NPM down here, and network performance monitoring, and another one here for a specific network and network performance monitoring and traffic dashboard. We don't have near enough time to go into all these, so I'm not going to. I just wanted to show you, that they are present and can be leveraged to get a leg up on using network telemetry once you start using the product. So going back to the dashboards, So as I said, this one is kind of the 50,000 foot view. If I go to this one, this is giving me, it repeats the traffic structure. These two widgets can be selected. You can have one or the other or both, depending on how you execute the script. I did both just for demonstration purposes. So as you can see, something funny happened on my network last night while I was sleeping. Don't know what it was. Haven't had the time to drill down on that yet. But however, everything seems to be running well now. So what this dashboard does, it presents, as I said, the 50,000 foot traffic view again, and then presents a widget per VS. So here in these two widgets, I'm showing just the traffic that is going through that specific VS, that virtual IP that you see in the upper left-hand corner of each widget. And of course, the traffic profiles to the two are different because they're different services. And they're set up to monitor specific things. So for this one, for the Exchange VS, which is running on 1.45, the most interesting thing to see here are the retransmissions, because that's usually the first sign of trouble in this sort of an application. So I've got the retransmissions shown here in this chart rather than the SRT and RTT. And over here on the right, we have these stoplight widgets. I'm calling them stoplight widgets because right now they're green, but they can turn yellow and red. Generally, you want your retransmission index to be 99.0 or better. So as soon as it goes below that, it starts turning yellow. And I forget where it turns red, but I think it turns red below 90. That indicates a real problem that you need to look at immediately. So these widgets are a good way of just having a quick look at something you can take a quick look at and just, okay, everything's fine. I don't need to worry about this today. Now the VS underneath is a different animal. If you're load balancing ECS storage nodes, you really don't give a crap about retransmission index. It's not really relevant. It's important on any network, of course, but it's not really that relevant to load balancing the storage. It's RTT that is the king here. And to that end, we have two widgets here on the right that show the retransmissions. The round trip time, the top 10 clients and, node or server on the back end, they're the top round trip times. And that's all that's on this screen. So it's basically the top level summary and then the summary for each VS. I'll just pause for a second in case anybody has a question. Okay. In the next dashboard, I'm showing one VS only. This is the Dell ECS VS, and it has some special needs when it comes to monitoring. So this topology widget here is useful not only as a picture of what your VS specific configuration looks like. In other words, get a load master, a VS running at virtual IP and 3 servers in the back end. And the lines in between are also indicators of the status of the network. You can set, again, a stoplight indicator. I might as well just show you here. Under configuration topologies, you have these topologies. Now, I could probably spend at least a half an hour just describing what you can do with these topologies. But what's pertinent right now is that each one of these links oh, I didn't mean to click on that, sorry. Each one of these links can have a specific threshold set for when it turns a different color. So again, you can have a you can have a red, green, blue indicator that you can look at a glance and know if the links for your application are okay today, without really digging too deep. As I mentioned before, RTT is an important indicator of node health for Dell ECS. So here we have a couple of alerts configured around RTT that have actually triggered. We can go look for more detail using more info, as I showed you before, on the alarm. But all I want to show you right here is that you can set alarms on an RTT threshold and as well on response codes. The other important thing to monitor for Dell ECS nodes are the response codes. Anything in the 400, 500 range needs to be investigated, basically. An administrator of a Dell ECS node would want to know immediately when one of those occur. They usually indicate trouble. And over here on the right is a widget that is just showing a count of the different result codes that came in and how many of them there were, how many flows contained that response code. And again, you can use this time I'll actually click it, this more info link to go back to this analysis page. Now, again, I could easily spend an hour describing this interface and how you can use it to drill down into the traffic. But this is the most complex analytical part of the product. And I don't have near enough time to get into it. But down here, you can do essentially searches by filtering the traffic. The way you have to think about the collector is that it's essentially a giant database of flows, and you're just searching through that database with these filters and presenting the information. So it makes it really handy to, if you see something you don't like in one of those widgets, to just go to the deep analysis and try to drill down on it. Okay, so let me go back to the dashboard. I was over here. Okay, so this is pretty, the rest of it I think is pretty self-explanatory. We've got the structure of the virtual service traffic here, and a bunch of what we call 2 pies on a table widgets that list top client and node RTT. We saw that before. Top uploads and downloads, top data transfers from all hosts. And then at the bottom, we have an NPM widget that is just about the 3 nodes behind the load master. So here we're looking at directly at the health of each of the servers. It's this kind of detail that you wouldn't get if you had servers behind the load master that essentially were not in the view of a probe running at the router. Alrighty, so that's the ECS virtual service, and then this is the Exchange virtual service. Again, for this one, retransmissions tend to be the key factor to look at. So we've got retransmission widgets over on the right, in addition to the traffic widgets on the left. Again, the data looks funny because I don't know what happened last night while I was sleeping. And yeah, and these two are not getting any traffic at all right now in my lab. And so here we have the virtual service traffic at the top. Each one of these widgets is about a specific sub-VS. This one is the OAB, and this one is the MAPI. And we can drill down further. We can look here on the next dashboard at the OAB traffic specifically, and the server traffic for that specific VS, both in aggregate and individually. Now, this may seem like overkill, but well, this is a demo. I mean, in reality, you probably wouldn't need all of these, but I'm just showing you here the different levels of detail that you can get, depending on how you want to slice and dice your data. So let's see, what else did I want to show you? Oh, yes, I wanted to show you the back end. So just briefly, oh, let me go to the home page. The collector is a huge product by itself. It's got many modules besides the basic dashboard and reports and monitoring center and configuration center that you get with the collector. And you would see those in a collector trial. This application performance monitoring module I'm not covering because it's not part of the basic trial and it's very complex. But and it's an extra expense to buy. It's another module that you buy for a collector, but it does provide much deeper insight than the regular dashboard and reports module. And again, I don't have time to cover that today, but these sorts of options are available for people that want to have even more control over their application performance monitoring. So just to go into the monitoring center for a moment before I stop for questions and discussion. This is the back end that you saw the script building. There's a hierarchy of things within the collector. It starts with a profile. And these are the profiles delivered with the box. So they have profiles for mail, routers, service. And you saw that on that 50,000 foot screen that I started out with. I created additional profiles specifically for the two VSs that I demoed for you. So they're in their own profile sections. So it's all of this detail that the scripts take care of. It's basically just grunt work to set up the dashboards, the ability to start using the widgets. And then once you define these profiles, and you can see, here they have channels that are used in all of the widgets: real server traffic, bad response codes for the ECS, VS, client-side traffic, total traffic, and then profiles for each server as well. So it's a bit complicated to set up, and I think the scripting really helps get away from that. Once you have the profiles together, then you define chapters. These chapters are the basis not only of reports, but of the widgets that you build in the dashboards. So that's the hierarchy, essentially: profiles, chapters, dashboards, widgets. And then there's the specific alert screen where all your alerts are listed. And when one of them is triggered, you can look at the details of the trigger. And that's pretty much all I wanted to present to you today. I'll be happy now to take your questions and look at any other things you'd like to look at.
Thank you, Mark. I'll start. So assuming I want to try this out in my own lab, what do I need? Is it like entirely virtual? Do I need anything physical?
Oh, it's entirely virtual. Both LoadMaster and Flowmon have hardware models, but we also have virtual models, as well as various clouds like Azure and AWS and a few others. So you can when you excuse me, just a sec, let me show you. So this is a LoadMaster. And if I go to network telemetry, this is where you configure your connection to the collector. I have my collector running at 1.9. This is running on VirtualBox on my laptop. So we even support VirtualBox. So if I want to download, you can download a collector right from here. The probe, as I said, is already running on the LoadMaster. If you hit this button, you go to our website, and you have to fill in what's called a Kemp ID. This is basically your ID within the Kemp universe. Of course, I already have one. This is a little slow. Okay, then you can select your hypervisor. And the right now it's only supported on Hyper-V, VMware, and KVM Zen. So for the collector, sorry, I misspoke. The Loadmaster is supported on all of on cloud and Hyper-V and VMware, KVM, and all these different platforms. For this Flowmon collector trial, we're only supporting these three.
Okay. I second Ibrahim's question in the chat regarding a demo license.
You don't need a demo license. There is a free Loadmaster available as well. So from our website, you can down either a trial, which will expire, or you can get a free version of the Loadmaster that is, I think it's good forever, or the closest thing you can get to forever. And it's, but it's limited. I forget exactly what the limitation is, but it's it's a throughput limitation, so you can't.
I think Gareth has posted something there. Seems to be a request for vExperts, right?
Yeah, you can get a 5000 series.
Yeah, which should apply to everybody in this group, I guess. So
there is a free one as well, which is limited to 20 meg load balancing, but it's free forever.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can do an NFR request, yeah, as well.
It looks good. Great. Perfect.
Very good.
I think the vExpert one has been around for a while, right, Gareth? I think it's been.
Yeah, it's been around for a while.
Looks
like
it's
just...
Yeah, the free one's been around for a while. I do remember that because I think some of you have had some interaction with it in the past.
It, yeah, I think the free Loadmaster started at the beginning of the pandemic, basically. So 2 years ago.
Is there any design guidance on the collector as well? In terms of, this is how big you should make it for a particular amount of infrastructure that you are collecting for, and that sort of thing?
Oh yes, there are a number of design guides around that. It's complicated. I couldn't even begin to get into that today. But yes, there is a sizing methodology for sizing a collector and probe deployment that Flowmon support, would be more than happy to help you with.
Also, one thing I was just wondering that I think in one of the slides earlier, you mentioned that, it's the collector can also be accessed by other systems, or if you want to send data to other monitoring systems. So which formats are there that is supported? Is that the other system needs to pull, or would the collector push stuff to those systems? How does that part work?
Right. The model is that the collector would push things, push flow data to the other device. So the other device needs to be able to accept flow data in one of the formats that it supports.
Right.
So
it's flow.
It would be
NetFlow
v9 or iFlow or JFlow or IPFix.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Good. Thank you.
And typically it's exported to something that's going to do some security analysis, like, some sort of virus scanner.
Do you anticipate any kind of third-party plugins? Again, I know I do a lot of work with other places where we might use Grafana for the dashboards. Do you ever see there being an integration you could pull some of your dashboards into Grafana potentially?
I know that the collector, well, of course, the collector has an API, and I didn't work on this, so I don't know specifically, but I know that What's Up Gold has been, which is a Progress product, longstanding Progress product, has been just recently modified to take in data from the collector and present it within the What's Up Gold UI. So I don't know the specifics, but yes, that is possible. There was also an opportunity I was in Asia, where a customer wanted to do something like that Right. It was Dell. Dell wanted to, yeah. Dell wanted to exactly reproduce the Flowmon dashboards in their UI. That's not possible, but you can get the data. But whatever you build out of them is up to the application that receives it.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you elaborate a little bit more maybe on the history of Progress and Camp? Because up to now, up to this event, I was not actually aware of Progress's existence. So maybe it's only me and I haven't heard of them. Camp, of course, was a known name, but Progress didn't ring a bell with me.
Sure, I can say a little bit about that. I was similarly bemused. I had not, I probably had heard of Progress over the course of the last 30 years or so, but it never was on my radar as a company. Was not a direct competitor and didn't seem to play in the same market. So I think that this is, while this is somewhat of an expansion of Progress's business, the reason, I think the reason that they bought us is a sound one. They have this idea of this a digital experience, across their applications already, and in interacting with their customers. Kemp has been morphing itself into an application experience company over time. There's even a book out about it, called about the AX Fabric, written by Ben Hodge, who's one of our engineers.
I think I sent. I sent a couple of you guys the book in the past. I think Atho, you might have one.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in the bookshelf behind you? It's a question. Oh, there we go. It is a real bookshelf.
It indeed is. When did you ever doubt it? Come on.
There we go. I think Abraham has one too because he's rummaging around.
So this whole idea of digital experience and application experience, they're very complementary. And as load balancing is becoming more of a commoditized function in the market, I see LoadMaster moving forward as more of a component of other applications in a service meshy kind of way, than being necessarily something you would deploy by itself. That's the way the LoadMaster market, in my eyes, has been going for a number of years before the pandemic. I think that the pandemic breathed new life into the ADC market to some extent, delaying what I said before, the commoditization of the ADC market. So I think it's definitely got more legs on it than anyone, including Gartner, thought. But I think that as has happened with Microsoft Exchange, load balancing functionality is getting subsumed into other higher level things. So I think that trend will continue, and load balancing as a separate device will be a thing of the past. It'll be more a component or a module that is applied where needed. And the industry itself, the ADC industry, needs to change a bit before that's going to become a reality. It's a bit too monolithic right now. Now, Progress, their claim to fame is a product called Open Edge, which has existed for 40 years and is still growing. It was the product that created Progress software, and I think has been, at least up until the past, say, 5 years, been the engine of their success. I think it's a great product for companies that want to build their own infrastructure and have more control over it than if they use, try to cobble together a bunch of third-party applications. So Open Edge is, I would say, Open Edge. Sitefinity is another big product, and What's Up Gold, which is a perfect fit for some of the functionality that we see on Flowmon. And in fact, that's an integration that we'll be doing on Loadmaster later this year. We're doing integrations with several of the current Progress products, including What's Up Gold and Sitefinity and OpenEdge, all of whom either can be deployed in situations where load balancing is needed, or would benefit from a secure front end like Loadmaster. That's also actually that's something else I want to mention, is that during the pandemic, some people in their homes have started to use these free load balancers as basically secure gateways, because the Loadmaster does have WAF functionality that is based on OWASP, the OWASP top 10 WAF rule set. So with Loadmaster, you get the OWASP rule set integrated into the WAF engine on Loadmaster, and a number of, I would say, private users are using this as a front end for their home network. And hence I get a lot of requests for Loadmaster on Raspberry Pi. I'm not quite sure what to do with that one yet.
If you can get a Raspberry Pi, so kind of
I'll
a bit
bring
short
it.
right now.
I guess
I'll
half
try
of those requests came from Gareth.
Gareth, yeah, I would say Gareth.
Well, at first I was not real positive about doing that, because it's not a zero cost to us to support a new platform. However, my thinking has changed a bit in the past 6 months, and I think that it might be something valuable for us to do, just to get more developer mindset.
I think Raspberry Pi is like, it's like one of those brand names, just like Coke. But we're finding more and more, or I'm finding more and more clients who are adopting ARM processors. So Raspberry Pi is a great example, but I'm finding more and more now using ARM for machine learning, artificial intelligence. It's got a much deeper kind of count on the cores. So yeah, I'm seeing quite a few businesses shift that way. And it's one of those odd questions I get every time. What does it support ARM? I was like, interesting question. I'm going to go find out.
Well, recently Apple started their laptop with ARM, so obviously you can see the market is going towards that direction.
Mm-hmm. So there's still hope, Gareth.
Hopefully one day.
All right, great stuff. Well, okay, that's time on that. Thank you very much, Mark, for that presentation. I have the video available for this recording, which I will make available to everyone so they can go over and take another look at it again. And I will also do an intro to everyone for Mark, so they can hit him up if they want to, ask any more questions in private.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Don't hesitate to send me an email. I'll be happy to answer it.
Mark, I have one question for you. So where do you sit in all this? Are you doing more integration with Kemp and Loadmaster with this product, or like what do you originally, when you started working, like how did you get started on building these dashboards and all that? How you showed us?
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, and primarily I did it to help sales. There was as I say, well, here, let me show you. Well, I'm out of my time. So when you fire up one of these collectors, I don't care if you use NME or whatever, they're blank. There's not much. They're not much fun yet. And we're trying to sell this stuff to Loadmaster customers who tend to be small to medium business owners. We're making inroads into we have lots of enterprise customers. Dell is a partner, but a big piece of our market is still SMB. So these people don't know network telemetry from a hole in the wall. How are they going to approach this blank screen when our salespeople bring it to them? With these scripts, our salespeople have something that they can show them immediately. They just say, "Where's your Loadmaster? Let me run this script. Okay, here, let's go look at some dashboards." And so instead of 5 hours of screwing around with a user interface,
makes sense. Your
you can
automation
take 5
definitely
minutes
makes
with a
sense.
script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And plus,
Yeah.
it feeds into our automation story. We also have a Kubernetes integration as a technical preview. I think it's a little bit more than that at this point, but yeah, I mean, it just makes sense.
I mean, I completely agree with that sentiment, because we realize operations, or what used to be its older name as well. So when it came about, obviously
VROps we used to call it. Good old days.
No, vRops it's now. I mean, it used to be vCenter operations and all that. So what I mean is that when it came about, still a useful product, but I think its popularity in use has increased quite a lot since then, as the built-in dashboards have increased. Because in the beginning it was like super metrics and this and that, and you had to create things and build your dashboards. I mean, there were one or two available. What I mean is that the customer always want to have something either out of the box or very easy to customize, and the ease of use of a product is what drives sales, because nobody wants to be developing things on another system. And gone are the days when you had to do all of that legwork. Nowadays, whichever product gives you the quickest result immediately is the one that will get the sale. So no, I completely agree with that sentiment and the work that you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I mean, I am a product manager, but you can tell by the gray whiskers on my face that I've been around a while and done a lot of different things. And so this just seemed like a good thing for my skill set. And so I did it. Nobody asked me.
Great stuff. All right, well, yeah. Thank you very much, Mark, for coming along and doing that presentation.
Thanks, Mark.
We're going to take a break now. I had us down for taking a break at 15:15, but we can overrun by 5 minutes. I think we've got enough time. We can just give Vic, who's just dropped on the call, we can give him an extra 5 minutes at the end. So if everyone wants to take 15 minutes, we can come back just after 15:30 the hour. And
I am going to drop off. It was nice meeting all of you.
yeah, Mark won't be joining us for the VR because it gives him the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I have vertigo. So VR headsets, no thanks. I'll be throwing up like a dragon in about 5 minutes.
So we don't want to see that.
Oh, I don't know. I'm over here. It might be fun. Who knows? No, but never. Thanks a lot, everybody. I really enjoyed it. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, everyone.
Thanks, Mark. Stay in touch. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'll hand it over to you, Vic, and you can get going with your bit now. And
okay. Well, first of all, hey everybody. I joined a little late, right, at the very beginning, but it's really early here where we're at on the West Coast here in Pacific Standard Time. So caught the end of the last one. So really cool, really nice, really cool content. And so you may have caught me at some of the conferences, right? As Cohesity, as former VMware, former HighTrust HighTrust with a Y before it got acquired by Entrust. So I've been around the circuit. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into this. Just want to make sure everybody's back. Looks like everybody's on camera. So that's good. And so the presentation will probably be a little bit shorter. I know that you've been on for quite some time now and you're all raring to go for VR, your VR session that Patrick has set up for all of you. So have fun with that. And let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right. So let's go ahead and get through this. I know you're raring to go for some VR. Unfortunately, I will not be able to join you, which I could have, but I still have work to do after this today. So, and so my name is Vic Camacho. I'm a principal technologist with Cohesity. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about addressing the modern day data breaches, which includes ransomware, right? Ransomware is that thing that has permeated our lives, businesses. But before we get started, like anything, we have a little disclaimer that I've been asked to provide. And so the disclaimer here is, to say that, it's a pretty basic disclaimer, right? So over the course of this presentation, I'll be making some forward-looking statements about new offerings and product capabilities that are currently on our roadmap, Cohesity's roadmap. While these statements about our roadmap are reasonable and accurate based on our current expectations, please be aware that future events could change, right? Current events like maybe lockdowns and such that could change Cohesity's plans at any time. So enough about that. Now, I think we can all agree that ransomware is permeated just about everywhere, right? It's a pretty ugly landscape. You know, there isn't a week that goes by where we don't hear about some ransomware attack happening somewhere. And it's happening in all industries too. It's happening in retail, it's happening in healthcare and education, just to name a few. These are just some of the screen caps that we've taken, right? And so they're on the rise. You know, the top one there, Colonial Pipeline. I'm not sure that you're aware of that, being across the pond there, but you know, it's permeated energy, right? And so it's been everywhere. Now, not only are these attacks, you know, coming in with increased frequency and volume, but they're also evolving in their tactics and becoming much more sophisticated, right? So you're going to hear me talk about ransomware 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, but essentially this is the rise of it on the graph here, right? Initially, attackers would come in, bad actors, cyber criminals, and they would attempt to breach and encrypt your data, right? Holding it ransom or holding it hostage for that ransom. The next evolution of it is they were starting to go after your backups, right? They wanted to go after your insurance policy, things that would allow organizations to recover and thereby avoiding having to pay that ransom. And so there were some things that needed to be done around there to ensure that the backups were now safe. And then finally, the last circle on the upper right-hand corner there is they started to steal your data, right? They had evolved and they wanted to exfiltrate your data. Now, they would make claims that they had the data. Whether they had it or not remains to be seen, right? They were making claims like this. And so they would threaten to put this up on the dark web or to a competitor. And we're gonna touch on this in just a little bit as well. Now, looking at the numbers behind this, we can see that 81% of ransomware attacks involve some threat of data exfiltration, right? So this is where the cyber criminals have made claims that they have access to the data and not just holding the keys to that encrypted data, right? And now, what's alarming here is that roughly 2/3 of organizations ended up paying the ransom just to ensure that the data wasn't exfiltrated. Now, that's a pretty costly proposition, and you're putting your faith into cyber criminals that don't really have, you know, they're lacking a little integrity here. So you can see how that could be very dangerous. Now, clearly, data breaches have been around for some time now. Whether those breaches happen through some form of insider threat, a bad actor, or even just through human error, right? A user accidentally clicking on a malicious link. Ransomware today has doubled for the same time period and makes up 10% of all those data breaches today. I would argue that that number is probably on the rise, given the fact that people are still working from home. We have data everywhere, right? Data has permeated on the web, in the cloud, on people's homes if they're not using an effective virtual desktop solution. Now, the average cost of data breaches is pretty high, right? 4.24 million there. Now, as per IBM Security, that number falls right around there, and it involves not only the cost of the ransom, but also involves collateral damage, like downtime, right? Your folks not being able to work. You also have to deal with lost reputation and lost business, just to name a few, right? And so if you're a sales organization, this can be detrimental to your bottom line, right? If you have a sales organization, you're asking these sales folks to go out and really work, you know, they have to work really hard just to gain customer confidence, to earn their business. And when something like a breach happens because simple checks and balances weren't put in place, and you do expose customer data and or patient data, because that's a real thing as well, then essentially you're asking your sales force to go out and work twice as hard to get half the confidence. And so even though you don't have, even though you may retain some of that business, they're always going to be looking at you with one eye on you, right? Because they're trusting you again. And some folks clearly they don't come back. Now, we realize that everything I've been talking about is kind of a high level, right? Because we're taking this view, we wanted to ask our customers, right, what how ransomware and the evolution of that was evolving, right? How was it impacting their own businesses? So what we heard back was that 95% of our customers wanted to be able to detect threats much earlier. It makes sense, right? We want to be able to remediate sooner than later so that we can potentially avoid a catastrophic event. 80% said the evolution of cyber threats have changed how they do security with both IT ops and SecOps. Now, if you're like me and you've been around the industry for a while, you know that IT ops and SecOps, they typically hold themselves at arm's distance, right? SecOps is about putting controls in place, slowing things down a little bit so that they're safe. IT ops, on the other hand, is about being nimble, being quick. Remember the term just-in-time inventory, right? It was about being agile, right? To take a word from today, right? They wanted to be more agile. But today, they've taken a much more collaborative stance to be able to fight these cyber criminals and safeguard their data, right? It's that important. I don't think that there's been ever been another time in IT history where security is now being put on the front burner, not on the back burner, right? So it's like putting the horse in front of the cart now, and really that's how we should be operating. Now, on the plus side, 82% have changed or are changing their data management strategy, right? And that bodes well for us because we're a data management company. So at Cohesity, we're pretty happy about this. So to be able to address their security threats in a more timely fashion. And then finally, 72% of those surveyed said the data management is part of their depth and defense security strategy. Now, this is something that we've been working on here at Cohesity, right? And we'll be touching base on this in just a moment here. But having a depth and defense security method is really going to help you to have a better security posture in the environment, right? And the solutions exist today, and we are just trying to help our customers be able to protect and safeguard the data in that manner. Now, I'm going to pause for just a second. I know we have a Q&A session at the end, but if you do have a question, feel free to flip it over to Patrick, and then Patrick can flag me down, and maybe if it's something we need to address right away. If not, we can wait to the end.
Yeah, I'll chuck up a flat traffic light if it's a good one.
All righty. Now, I just talked about ransomware 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, right? The evolution of it. And so how do we address initially the ransom 1.0 scenario, right? It really starts with the data. And this slide built out a little faster than I wanted to, but it really is about data resiliency. And so we offered things like encryption and fault tolerance, right? And so apart from that, we also had some pretty effective access control mechanisms like MFA and RBAC, right? Multi-factor authentication and role-based access controls to keep the bad actors from getting to your data in the first place. And then finally detection and analytics, right? Being able to use our AI and ML to be able to detect anomalous behavior so that you can go and address it before something catastrophic happens. Slide's not moving forward. Okay. There we go. So now with ransomware 2.0, they were going after your data, your backups, right? And so this is where we introduce immutability, right? So it's one thing to have multiple backups of your data, right? You're supposed to have multiple backups, but how do you keep it from getting infected, right? And so we introduce immutability so that the data that was sitting back there, and we use this through snapshotting, right? You have multiple snapshots of your data so that you could recover in the case of in case that it did make it to your backups, you had multiple snapshots that were immutable and they wouldn't allow anyone to go past that. So you were able to effectively recover from a backup that hadn't been infected. The other part of that is being able to continuously monitor right? And part of that is through our AI and ML powered mechanisms, but we also introduced quorum, right? So we know that multi-factor authentication is a person having to authenticate against a secondary authentication mechanism to prove that that person is really them. Now, quorum, on the other hand, if you're not familiar, is I like to use the analogy, right? It's like two people needed to turn the keys on a nuclear bomb. So that's one, that's kind of deep, but you can also think of it as a banker and you having a safety deposit box and needing to go open that, but you need a secondary person to turn the key to get to your lockbox there, right? So we introduced that so that not one single person could just make changes to the system. It would require at least two. And so that's how we started to address the bad actors, the cyber criminals going after your backups, is to provide some immutability and not allowing them to change anything on the system. All right, so ransomware 3.0, right? Encryption with exfiltration. Now, and then this slide also built out a little sooner than I wanted to, but anyhow, so today, ransomware 3.0, they're really trying to exfiltrate your data, right? And again, not to get too technical or mechanical with this slide, but the important point is that ransomware 3.0 has been a game changer on a number of fronts, right? So to begin, ransomware 3.0 starts out very similar to the other two, right? It starts out by wanting to encrypt. It starts out by wanting to go after your backup. But how do you address exfiltration, right? And so by the time things like an anomaly has been detected for ransomware, right, exfiltration is happening. And if you look to your lower left-hand corner, it says exfiltration begins. It happens earlier in the breach now, right? So you become infected, exfiltration automatically starts to begin. And so by the time they go after your backups or your AI is kicked in and is looking for anomalous behavior, it might be too late, right? And so a lot of this has to begin much earlier. This is where a lot of organizations are finding it challenging, right? They want to be able to detect this. So how do you do that, right? And so we address this, and now it's built out. Right, and so, and this, again, this is just the investigation and the recovery before you can recover. But again, the takeaway here is that we need to be able to detect exfiltration sooner or have a mechanism to protect against exfiltration from the get-go. So how do we address this, right? So we have, you think about data security and governance, right? Now, data security is really talking about who has access to the data, right? The question becomes, who in the organization can access that sensitive data? And how do you know if you're leaking data or not? Now, data governance, on the other hand, is all about knowing what kind of data you have and where it sits, right? When you consider today's modern data landscape, for lack of a better term, right? You have cloud, you have IoT, you have all these new SaaS services and offerings. And so data is really everywhere. And so organizations are struggling to know where all that sensitive data is, right? And we're going to get into this in just a second, but I can't even begin to tell you the amount of times while at my previous role in a cybersecurity organization, where we would come in and we would ask, right, the CISOs, right, the CISOs, that, if they had a policy of, ensuring that sensitive data was only in trusted zones, right? What's the policy? And a lot of them had policies around it. They were at least doing that. But they were, 90% sure that none of this sensitive data, whether patient information or customer data, or credit card numbers, things of that nature, was sitting in a development area, right? A non-production environment. And so we would run this tool and it would go out and comb through their data. And I kid you not, it was 100% hit rate in finding sensitive data in a non-production environment, in an untrusted zone where it's not as regulated. right? And so what we're talking about here is the convergence of both data security and data governance, right? Now, there's a saying, right? You can't protect what you don't know, right? If you don't know you have it, then how can you protect it? You don't know it's there. And so that's what some of these new features that we're adding that are coming, we're going to talk about. Now, as I mentioned, being able to identify sensitive data is key, right? Knowing where it's at and once you've detected where it's at, then moving it to a trusted zone is part of that remediation effort, right? So that's key, right? Because then now you know where your data is at, and you're not going to have data laying around in unprotected areas. The other is streamlined compliance reporting, right? The tool that you use, the solution that you use, should not only be able to detect that, but also give you a comprehensive report of where that's at. So think audits here, right? If you're in the healthcare organization, you're subject to HIPAA mandates. If you're in retail, you're subject to PCI DSS, right? The various flavors of it. If you're in law enforcement, you have CJIS, right? So every industry has their regulatory mandates that they have to adhere to. And so auditors always will come in and they'll ask for some kind of reporting mechanism. Where is the latest reporting mechanism that tells me where your data is at? Now, one way of doing that is using a tool like this so that you can quickly hand that over. Because if you don't have it, you know what happens, right? Auditors will come and, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if you don't have a simple reporting mechanism, chances are that there's something deeper going on. And so they're going to, it's going to poke and prod them to investigate further. And that's something that we're trying to avoid. And then obviously remediation, right? How do you quickly remediate? Being able to know where that data is at and remediate quickly so that you have your sensitive data and be able to potentially save it from being exposed. And then finally, a system that has a strong AI-based security, right? Being able to detect anomalous behavior. These AI and ML solutions are getting much more sophisticated, right? And the learning that it's doing today is just growing at an exponential rate. And a lot of folks are starting to use this. We certainly are using it as well. So that brings me to Cohesity's threat defense architecture, right? This is pretty exciting for me because, we're a data management organization, but haven't been someone that came from the infrastructure space, right? I cut my teeth in the infrastructure. Early in my career, it's about data centers and cabling, rack and stack, and then made a career out of virtualization, right? Working over at VMware. And so, but as an infrastructure person, you don't see everything. You're a part of security efforts or even audits, right? Prior to working in this industry, on the vendor side of the house, I was a practitioner in the customer space, right? And so you kind of stay in your swim lane, so to speak, right? So you stay in your lane and you're about the infrastructure, but you are at times brought in for some kind of security effort, right? Because it's always going to have to involve IT ops in some way. And so you don't realize how much as an IT ops person, you don't realize how much is being missed, right? It wasn't until I spent time at High Trust that really opened my eyes, right? It really, and I'm so thankful for it because it helped to round out my level of expertise, so to speak, right? It really opened my eyes to some of the gaping holes and the gaps in the armor I had as just an IT ops practitioner. And so this Cohesity cyber threat defense architecture is a very comprehensive and it's multi-layered, right? And its core, it begins with, again, data resiliency, right? So we offer things like encryption, fault tolerance, and immutability. Those things that address ransomware 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. Now, it also comes with some, the second circle there, it comes with some various access control mechanisms, right? Think MFA and RBAC here to keep cyber criminals from tampering with your data in the first place. Now, to help with ransomware 3.0, right, and that threat, this is where our A-power detection and analytics comes into play to help you harden the environment before something catastrophic can occur. This is also where data classification comes into play, right? To help you determine where all that sensitive data is at. Is it in a protected area? Is it not in a protected area, right? And so you can take this data and start to remediate against it if you do have that, right? And it'll find it, whether it's in a production environment or not. Now, to close this slide off, to finish the slide off, beyond what we provide ourselves, we realize that ransomware is not something that any one vendor can solve alone, right? So we integrate with a range of third-party partners out there to help us combat ransomware, right? And just looking at this slide, you have things like near real-time threat detection, data classification. This is what's really going to help you with that 3.0 ransomware threat. And I'm going to pause here because this always has questions for whatever reason. So does anybody have any questions around this? I'd really like to know.
Again, you say it's vendors, but again, I find with a lot of this, is it also about the humans as well, making sure that your employees are trained properly? Do you see you working with any vendors who actually go out and doing some kind of, let's say, fake exfiltration to try and wake certain people up potentially? And that's where I always find it. I've done security auditing in the past. It's always the human element that fails. Tech normally is okay, but it's always someone lets you tailgate through, or they leave USBs on the floor. How what's your perception in the industry on that?
Oh, that's a really good question, right? So while at my cybersecurity organization that I worked at, right, we had this term called the new atomic unit of IT, and it involved processes, technology, and then the third was people. And people were always going to be the weak link, right? And not so much that organizations have a bunch of malicious bad actors running around the environment, right? You have this interview process and you vet out people before you hire them, but you just never know what's going on in a person's life. And so it's not that you don't trust people, but you want to mitigate risk wherever and whenever you can, right? If you can say anything about business, is that it's about mitigating risk wherever and whenever, and cybersecurity is just one of them. Now, to address the penetration testing and unfortunately, a lot of that happens after the fact, right? It's a knee-jerk reaction, and by that time, something's already happened, right? There's damage to your brand name, you've lost business, and so it's this big recovery, and it takes time to recover from that, right? Once it's made its way into the news, right? And I think we can point to so many, large retail outlets, healthcare. This is really sensitive data, right? Having your medical records exposed, or your name, address, and social security exposed, that just makes it ripe for identity theft. And so, yeah, it typically becomes a knee-jerk reaction to something happening. But you're right, training folks, and I've been through this too, and I'm sure everybody on this call has, where you've taken cybersecurity training, right? And and it's over the course of a day or even longer than that, and you have to go through this because that's really where we're at today, right? Now we're all in IT, we understand, but your typical user, even power users, but your typical user, they don't know to check, to hover over a link before they click on it to see what the actual address is, right? Because everybody's in a rush. Everybody just wants to get through the day and finish off their work. And so awareness is going to be key. And while it may not completely stop breaches, right, accidentally, then you definitely will minimize it. Right. Again, there's malicious activity and then there's accidental activity. And this is where and if you look here, where access controls comes into play, because if somebody does, if I'm being, irresponsible and I put my password and credentials on a Post-it note and hang it off my monitor and somebody just happens to come by and see that, right? That's where multi-factor authentication comes into play. Now, I hope folks aren't doing that, but the reality is that someone might do it, right? And a lot of times it's just temporary, right? Like, I'm just gonna put this here because I just got this password, but that's all it takes. So that Thanks for the question. That was a great question.
No worries.
Anybody have, I think that just is more of a best practice, right? There are certain things that we should be doing to mitigate risk wherever we can. All right, so let's go ahead and summarize a little bit here. So battling the scourge of ransomware with Cohesity, right? So just to summarize what we went over. So in ransomware 1.0 or 1.0, it was about having immutable backups, continuous data protection, anomaly detection. But the one here that I really like is the instant mass restore, right? We call it IMR. And that gives you the ability to recover in, let's just take the example of a VMware environment, right? You have a vSphere environment and you have hundreds of VMs that have been infected, right? And so the first thing you do is hopefully you have an effective east-west traffic management, right? Where you're segregating the various traffic east and west so that you can prevent ransomware from spreading that way. But if in the event that you do get infected, being able to recover all of those VMs instantly is pretty neat, right? And so what happens behind the scenes, and I'll just spend a little time talking about this, is that we have a Cohesity, data store that once the environment has been cleaned, you could present up into the environment, and those VMs, because they're clean, you can start powering them off right away, powering them on right away. And so you can quickly recover. Now that could be 10, 20, it could be 200 VMs. We have a video on YouTube that showcases this. And behind the scenes, what you don't see behind the scenes is that this data store that was presented from up by Cohesity and is clean, once all those virtual machines start to power on, behind the scenes, it starts to do a storage vMotion back to the original data store that they were on, so that you can recover quickly, right? I suggest, maybe in a link, Pat, we might be able to get that to them if they're interested in seeing it. But it's a pretty cool video and how fast you can actually recover. So that's something that helped us on ransomware 1.0.
Yeah, we can, if needed, we can get that sorted out. So if anyone wants to see that, they can either get the video or we can actually just go through it.
Yeah, and I think it was our good friend Chris Colati that put that one together. Yeah. All right, so ransomware 2.0, right? And so this is where we added data isolation vault, right? Not air gapping vault. It's a data isolation vault, right? And this is something that we have coming soon, right? And we'll talk about that in just a moment. And so this allows you to have a data that's in our vault that's ran by Cohesity. And so you simply consume the services, right? So it's an as a service model. And then finally here in 3.0, what we covered already was the data governance, right? The meshing of data governance and knowing where your data is at and being able to effectively move it to a production grade environment, right? Something that we call a trusted zone. And so below there, that's where these solutions that we have coming out, Data Protect and Fort Knox and Data Govern. Right, so Fort Knox is that shiny new thing that we have coming out. Hopefully, nothing prevents it from coming out when we want it to come out. But Fort Knox and Data Govern will help you with that ransomware 3.0 and part of ransomware 2.0 security strategy. Right, giving you a data isolated vault in the cloud that we run and manage for you. And so. Speaking of best practices, right? We touched base on some of them just a moment ago. Protect your backups, right? We want to be able to inventory these workloads. We want to turn on data lock, right? We want to have that immutability. We want to like anything. This is a best practice. We know that we should maintain multiple copies of your data, including the ones that are secured by an air gap vault, but an isolated vault. And then again, secure your environment. Having multi-factor authentication, ensuring that you have implemented some form of zero trust. And that's really what we're talking about here, right? Zero trust. It's not that you don't trust the folks working in the organization, but we're mitigating risk because accidental breaches account for most of what's going on out there, right? Most of what's going on is not malicious. It's somebody clicking on something they weren't supposed to. And so if you can enable that multi-factor authentication, if you can enable that least privilege access model, right? Something that I only touched upon lightly, but having a least privilege access model allows folks to work in their job capacity, but not have access to anything else, right? So for those of you that are familiar with the VMware environments in vSphere, if I'm a network engineer and that's what I'm responsible for maintaining in the vSphere environment, then I really don't need a purview to the data store environment, right? I don't even need to look at it, because if I have access to it, the chances of something going wrong increases, right? And so again, it's just mitigating that risk, right? And then know where your crown jewels are, right? I know I've talked about this pretty extensively here, but knowing where your data is important, right? Again, it's knowing where it's at so you can effectively protect it. And one of the examples I like to use here is your intellectual property, right? So I have a friend that works for the media and entertainment business, right? It's for the Screen Actors Guild. And so they have so much sensitive data, right? They have movie scripts. They have this within their possession. And a lot of these are, if you can imagine, if you think about the blockbuster movies out there, right? The Harry Potters, the MCU, right? Marvel Comics. And so these are a lot of, this is big money. And so can you imagine if that got leaked out to a bad actor or leaked out to the dark web and some other author or writer got a hold of that, right? Who's going to take credit, right? So this could be potentially a lot of lost revenue. And this is what we're trying to avoid, right? Placing our customers in the best position for success. And then finally, to touch base on what Gareth had mentioned, right? Prepare your organization. Practice the recovery, right? Do it before something happens. Employ that layered defense, right? And everything, right? And email and endpoints, right? Web, network. And then perform security skills assessment and training for all personnel, right? That is key because, again, people are going to be the weak link on it. We're just prone to error, right? We're human. We're prone to error, and that's something that can certainly happen. And that's all I had. So I hope I didn't kill you too much with the slideware here. I don't have a demo. Get you guys back to your VR, and if you have any questions or we want to have a discussion, for sure, let's have those. Those are always fun. This is intended to be free flowing, and I see a lot of smart people in the room. So have at it. I will stop sharing this now.
Nice, Vic. Nice. Thanks. So if anyone's got any other questions they want to throw out or any discussion points they want to throw out,
I have training for all these people behind me.
I've had it now. Yeah, exactly.
This guy right here.
Hi, Vic. I've got a quick question. In terms of product, you've got Data Protect, the one that that's been there for a while. Do Fort Knox and Data Govern, are they separate products that you buy Data Protect and then you get these extra licenses, or is that all just one big suite and you buy a Cohesity and there you go, kind of?
No, that's a good question. So Data Protect is a product, right? And it can and will be baked in, right? And the iterations of releases, and yes, it'll be based off of licensing, right? So it'll be licensing that enables one feature over the other. Now, Fort Knox, on the other hand, is not baked in to the solution. It is our as a service offering, right? So we're running it in AWS. We manage the underlying systems. We manage the data there. You manage how it gets there and put those access controls in place for your organization. So you're just consuming the service, right? We just manage the underlying infrastructure there for you. And yes, it's all immutable. And it allows you to have this air-gapped or this isolated vault, if you will, right? We're trying to get away from the term air-gapped because air-gap is nothing but taking a cord and then cutting it, right? So you can do that virtually now. You don't need to physically do it. And physically doing it also introduces a lot more cost when you have a solution that way. And for some folks, that might be too much. Does that answer your question?
At the back, is it at the back end actually working with AWS Vault in some way, or archiving, those side of things, or is it your own solution?
It's our own solution. So it's actually Helios running in that space. So the integration, because you have Helios on-prem and Helios up there, all the integration is there, right? We're just mainly using the AWS infrastructure behind the scenes. So we manage that, and it's all Helios, right? It'll be some, the latest version, obviously. So as folks start to upgrade their own Cohesity environments, they will have that integration already there, ready for them, if they decide to use it. Hopefully they do, right?
So what would you then suggest that is the best way for connectivity? So for example, if someone is not an AWS client, or for example, if someone doesn't have direct connect and those kind of things, so what do you suggest? What's the mechanism of getting the data there? What do you suggest, or mandate even?
Yeah, so pretty much like how we get data to and fro other cloud service providers today, right? You can do it via a backup, so doing the incremental backups or the full backups. You can recover. You can use the recovery feature of Helios and recover it to that, right? So we have the ability to back up to multiple targets or to recover to multiple targets. So if you do have something that gets infected on-prem, and you want to recover from, like I mentioned, from an isolated or an immutable backup that hasn't been infected, then you can back up directly to that, and then use it just for the time it takes you to recover on your on-prem Helios, and then from there, and then move it back if you don't want to use it anymore. So it's pretty flexible. So that just the way we move data around today is essentially the same thing. It's just up in the cloud now. For some people that don't want more infrastructure, it's the newer organizations, they like using as a service model, right? Older organizations have a little more challenging time with it because they're so used to owning and having everything. But I think newer organizations and folks that are open to releasing a little bit of that the infrastructure control, it makes sense. But I've seen it work. I know there's a few things there that I'm not familiar with because it's so new, and I just haven't been able to use it. Good question. Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that? I much like you, I hate the term air gapped because again, I've worked on kind of governmental sites, and air gapping was true air gapping. 2 rooms, you couldn't walk between it. You got scanned every time. But using that loose term there, is it with the Helios platform that it orchestrates that air gapping then? Something makes a request, says I would like to store this securely, and how does it negotiate that? Or is that something you can't kind of let us know yet because it's still kind of, as you said, it's just trying to understand that mechanism. As you said, is there some kind of PSO, some stuff that has to be working on your system before it can do that? Or how does that kind of mechanism work? If it's not ready yet, that's fine. It's just my curiosity has got the better of me because that's really quite clever.
Yeah, I think it's not, it's actually, so you still employ the same mechanisms, right? You multi-factor authentication. Now, and this is where I'm, I don't want to speak out of turn because it's got some strong security, right? And I'm not sure if it's multi-factor or some part of that quorum. So I can't really speak to it, right? I'd probably have to get that. Let me jot that. Can you jot that down, Pat? So that we can get that back, because when I think through this, clearly we don't want just be able to back up to it, right? So there's going to have to be some kind of control mechanism, multi-factor authentication, role-based access controls, right? We want to tightly control that, but the customer has total control of that, right? We are just simply providing Helios in the cloud, and it's isolated. It's an isolated vault. And it also gives you the ability to, for those of you that are familiar with like SRM, right? Site Recovery Manager from VMware, it allowed you to test in an isolated environment, right? So you could kind of gap it off that way. It's the same principle, right? So if you want to test, you can use that as a completely separate environment so that it's not connected to the network, right? Because that's part of the gapping, right? Is severing that connection once it's there. And so you can test there without affecting all your workloads on-prem. And then when you're done, you can just delete it all if you need to, right? You use it how you need to. But let me find out what the exact mechanism is for that.
I've actually got a brief on it in my notes here from when I worked with you, Vic. And I basically have a note here that says that the virtual air gap is around a tamper resistant and operationally independent environment. So I mean I can look further into that, or we can look further into that. So I am making a note of it to get back to Gareth.
Yeah, because I mean I think you're right, and I think it's important to understand that mechanism so folks are aware of how that works, right? It is very new though. You don't want it to be connected permanently, right? That defeats the purpose. Yeah. We really truly want an isolated vault for your data so that it's protected, so that if you do have to recover, that nothing's in there is being infected. It's completely isolated, and so if you do ever have to, you can recover from an isolated environment that doesn't have any connectivity to anything to your environment.
Yeah, if it feels very much like, again, the term was stolen Dropbox that used to be on the Mac, where you could drop a file into someone's folder. Yeah. Once it's in there, it's gone. But it's like how those machines, you knock on the door, it says, "Oh, I'm ready for the file." I receive the file, and then it's gone forever, kind of thing. We used to use that a lot in marketing places where you send over the copy, they receive the copy, but once you sent it, that's it. You can never get it back. It was gone. And that's kind of in my head how I envisage it. It's just I think it'd make a really interesting post on how that mechanism works.
Yeah, I mean, and there are true air gap systems out there, but again, it's introducing more infrastructure hardware, right? You said it, like you have your appliance on-prem, and you have this completely, I mean, literally have to run a cable from one end to the other and when it's not connected, that there's no connectivity there, right? So it's on a different network. And there's some mechanisms there that help control that when I think it's a call and not a push, right? So you have to call it from the outside or vice versa, I forget. But again, it's a more complicated way of doing it. And it introduces more hardware that you may or may not need.
We'll get that one outlined. I mean, I've been on enough calls for Fort Knox, and I don't know that one either. It's been on virtual lockdown for quite a while. We've been like, I'd say anything for a while now.
We'd have to be really careful today, so we're just pixie dust around it.
Yeah, no, if you're looking to do something a bit more on that, Gareth, then I'll follow up with Vic and make sure that we have a wider conversation on that. But if anyone wants to hold in on that, then we'll do it. But yeah, I think we're pretty much encroaching time now, so if anyone's got anything else speak now, or we will jump into a virtual environment after a short break.
I'm kind of jelly. I gotta say, I'm kind of jealous. I kind of wanted to join, but I've got some things here, right?
Well, next one, when you're not presenting, Vic, we can get you in as an attendee.
There you go. Okay, I'm down for that for sure.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, when I announced that one and put the pictures of the VR headsets online, my DMs were like, "Oh, how do I join?" Straight away.
Oh yeah.
And so how do I join? And I probably had about 20 people, but there was only one person fast enough to take up the free slot, wasn't there, Jens?
Was that?
Jens here. Literally, I had one free slot, and he messaged me going, "How do I get on board?" I'm like, "All right, you're on board."
And here I am.
You were quickest by seconds. Literally, I had another 20 people come in and go, "Oh, I'm in." I was like, "Sorry,
everybody
if you're not
loves some Oculus Quest and some awesome technology."
Yeah.
I have Cohesity in Nuremberg next week for a big German customer, by the way, for some dinner and some talk about Cohesity's awesomeness. So Cohesity's awesomeness.
There we go.
That term has been coined.
There we go. I'll put that one forward, but I'll let you win at golf. It's fine. All
Right
good.
on.
All right, Vic. Well, thanks very much for that. And yeah, but Vic, your handle is virtual_Vic on Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I know some of your faces are very familiar. Out there, I think yours are too. So, you know, virtual_Vic on Twitter, or Victor Camacho at LinkedIn. You know, I'm pretty accessible. You know, say hi, reach out. I like mixing it up. So feel free to reach out. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I know you want to get to your VR sessions here and have a great time with that. And so with that, I am going to hop on this thing and I'm going to head out.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay.
Take
Thanks,
care,
Vic.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that's wrapped up that part, and on to the more interesting, more fun part. We'll take, I think I had us down for a 15-minute break because you're gonna need to water yourself, feed yourself, and whatever you need to do to be fully immersed. If some of you have tried it already, the Walkabout Golf, I think it's quite addictive. The first time I played it, I think I ended up doing like 3 or 4 hours in it, and then you look at your watch and you go, oh, okay.
How do we join that?
Okay, so what's going to happen? I should have you all on. First of all, you should have all charged them. That's a rookie mistake if you didn't charge them, although they do have quite a good cable usually. But basically, what will happen is I've got you all on Friends, so I will invite you all to a group when I see you all online over the course of like 10-15 minutes, and we will be able to talk on that. And there will be 2 groups. So I'll give you, we'll be able to talk. I'll give you access to the 2 private rooms for playing the golf, because it's maximum 5 players and there's more than 5 of us. So there'll be 2 private rooms. I'll split us up, and then we should be able to go, and we'll we can all be in the same chat room over the 2 games, so we can hear each other. Or if it gets a little bit crazy, I'll tell everyone to just go in-app communication, and then that's very easy to do as well. And then we'll be kind of more in-game with each other rather than 2 games.
I'll have to drop out after, I would say, 20 to 30 minutes. I have another evening engagement coming up.
No worries, no worries. There's 2, 4. I'm not sure what the Graham's making. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 of us. I'm probably going to fold in my brother who works for Microsoft. He's going to come on as well as an extra head, because he's always into VR. He's only got me into it anyway. So I'll try and fold him in. So we should have at least like 3, 4 people per game anyway. So it should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say that do we need a break? I mean, I might have to run after 5:30.
That should be fine. I mean,
how things blow up.
It's fun. If you have to go, you got to go. If you want to stay and play, it's fine. It's a bit of fun. It's a bit of networking. It's just a fun bit of interaction. But what I'm actually going to be doing at least one of the just standard VR gaming session for the community a month, not with presentations or anything. Just I'm going to stick it online or stick it in the calendar, and I'm trying to get more people VR headsets sponsored by vendors. If we have to sit through a few presentations to give more out to the community, my plan is to try and build this kind of metaverse community where we can socialize like this, as well as maybe do other things, maybe get the next lot of presentations actually in something like Facebook Spaces, where you can do a virtual whiteboard, something cool like that.
I'm up for it.
Very nice.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a good idea.
All right, great. Okay, so if everyone pops on their Oculus in the next few minutes, I'll be on, and then I will start inviting you all, and then we'll crack on.
Do we need to stay in the Zoom, or can we close it down?
I know you can close the Zoom down, because we'll be talking in Oculus chat. So I'll do that, and I will see you all virtually in the next few minutes.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you then.
You guys.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.